Rain hammered the windshield of Jackson Reed's sleek silver Bentley like 1,000 tiny fists, each drop a mocking reminder of how little control he had over this God-forsaken day. The billionaire gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles whitening as the storm raged around him, wind howling through the desolate stretch of highway like a banshee on a rampage. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the dark clouds that seemed to press down on him, mirroring the weight of the moment. He was 30 minutes from the biggest deal of his life, a $10 billion merger that could cement his legacy as one of America's sharpest tycoons. His jaw clenched, his sharp green eyes narrowing as he glanced at the dashboard clock glowing Winrosser. 15 p.m. Time was slipping through his fingers, and Jackson Reed didn't lose to time. He didn't lose, period. Then it happened, a jolt, a sickening thud, and the car lurched to the right with a violence that made his stomach drop. "Son of a," he roared, his deep voice cutting through the drumming rain as he wrestled the steering wheel, guiding the Bentley onto the muddy shoulder. The world outside blurred into a gray smear as he slammed on the brakes, the car shuddering to a stop. He sat there for a moment, chest heaving, the realization sinking in like cold water seeping through his tailored navy suit. A flat tire, of all the damn things. Jackson shoved the door open and stepped out, rain soaking his dark hair and plastering his white dress shirt to his broad chest. The wind whipped at him, tugging at his tie as he squinted at the shredded rubber hanging off the rim. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, his voice thick with frustration as he kicked the tire, mud splattering across his polished leather shoes. He popped the trunk, staring at the spare tire in the jack like they were alien artifacts. Jackson Reed, self-made king of the tech world, didn't change tires. He had assistants, drivers, entire teams for that kind of thing. But here he was, stranded on a lonely road flanked by endless fields, the nearest town miles away, with no one but the storm to keep him company. He yanked his phone from his pocket, the screen glowing mockingly. "No service." "Perfect," he growled, tossing it onto the passenger seat. He ran a hand through his dripping hair, pacing beside the car as the rain stung his face. If he missed this meeting, it wasn't just money on the line. It was his reputation, his image as the man who always delivered. The thought gnawed at him, a sharp edge of panic slicing through his usual steel composure. He was about to give up, to slam the trunk shut and scream into the void, when something cut through the storm. Laughter, faint at first, then louder, bright and defiant against the roar of the wind. Jackson turned, squinting into the distance, and saw them, three figures pedaling toward him on rickety bicycles, their silhouettes blurred by the rain. As they drew closer, he made out three teenage boys, all black, their mismatched raincoats flapping as they rode. The tallest, Yanmenas Honcho, a lanky kid with a faded red hoodie peeking out from under his coat, slowed to a stop a few feet away, his bike skidding slightly in the mud. "Hey, Yanderer, Mary Mansur, you good?" he called out, his voice warm and casual, a grin spreading across his face despite the downpour. Jackson blinked, caught off guard. "Oh," he admitted, gesturing to the ruined tire, flat tire. "I'm screwed." His tone was clipped, his frustration spilling over, but the boy didn't flinch. Instead, he hopped off his bike, handing it to one of his friends, a shorter kid with a green raincoat and a cap pulled low over his eyes. "We got you," the tall one said confidently, brushing wet curls from his forehead. "I'm Marcus. That's Jayden," he nodded to the kid with the cap. "And that's Corey," the third boy, wiry and wearing a too big yellow slicker, waved with a shy smile. "You know how to fix this?" Jackson asked, skepticism lacing his words as he crossed his arms, rain dripping from his elbows. Marcus laughed, a sound so easy it almost felt out of place in the chaos. "Yeah, not sure. Sure he was. We've patched up worse than this. Bikes mostly. But a car's not that different." Jayden and Corey nodded, already moving toward the trunk like they'd done this 100 times. Jackson watched, half doubting, half desperate. "Going to serve anyone?" As Marcus knelt by the tire, inspecting it with a practiced eye. "Spares in there, right?" he asked, glancing up through rain-spattered glasses. "Yeah, Mom," Jackson said, stepping aside as Jayden hauled out the jack and Corey grabbed the wrench. The boys worked like a unit, their movements smooth and unspoken. Jayden setting up the jack, Corey steadying the car, Marcus loosening the lug nuts with quick, short twists, and what if for nothing. Jackson stood there, hands on his hips, rain soaking through to his skin, marveling at their efficiency. "You don't mind the rain?" he asked, his voice softening despite himself. "Nah," Corey said with a shrug, his voice quiet but steady. "We're already wet. Might as well make it worth it." Jayden grinned, passing Marcus the spare tire. "Plus, Ikin, this is kind of fun." Fun. Jackson almost laughed. The absurdity of it hitting him. Here he was, a billionaire on the brink of losing everything, and these kids were treating it like a game. In less than 20 minutes, the flat was off, the spare was on, and Marcus was wiping his muddy hands on his raincoat with a satisfied nod. "All set," he said, standing up. Jackson stared at the tire, then at the boys, disbelief mingling with a grudging respect. "You're kidding me," he said, shaking his head. "You just saved my ass." He reached for his wallet, pulling out a stack of bills, hundreds, crisp and dry despite the storm. Here, take this." "You earned it." Marcus held up a hand, stepping back. No, no. "Thanks, Wishwasher Warner. Men, it need viver and chunny too many." "We're good." Jayden and Corey nodded, their expressions firm. "We didn't do it for that," Jayden added, his tone matter-of-fact. Jackson frowned, the bill still outstretched. "Come on. It's the least I can do. You've got no idea what you just pulled me out of." "We're sure," Marcus said, his grin unwavering. "Just get where you're going." "All right. Drive safe." And with that, that's fun. They climbed back on their bikes, pedaling off into the rain, their laughter fading into the distance. Jackson stood there, money still in hand, watching them disappear. For a moment, he felt something unfamiliar, a flicker of warmth, a crack in the armor he'd worn for years. He shook it off, climbing back into the Bentley, the clock now reading 4:45 p.m. He could still make it. The drive to the city was a blur, the storm chasing him as he pushed the car to its limits. His mind should have been on the merger, numbers, timelines. Now may turn the stakes, but it kept drifting back to those boys. Marcus's confident grin, Jayden's steady hands, Corey's quiet shrug. They'd asked for nothing, expected nothing. It didn't make sense in his world, where every favor had a price tag, every kindness a hidden agenda. By the time he pulled up to the gleaming skyscraper, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. He stepped out, adjusting his soggy tie, ignoring the valet's raised eyebrow at the mud on his cuffs. Inside, the conference room hummed with tension, his team pacing, the investors waiting. Jackson took his seat, slipping into the role he knew so well, the unshakable deal-maker. The meeting stretched on, hours of negotiations and sharp exchanges. He nailed it. Of course, the merger was his, the investors impressed, his team exhaling in relief. But as they shook his hand and filed out, Jackson felt hollow. The victory didn't hit like it usually did. He retreated to his office, loosening his tie and sinking into his chair, staring out at the rain-streaked city. On any other day, he'd be popping champagne, basking in the wind. But tonight, his mind was stuck on that muddy roadside, on 3 kids who turned his day around and walked away empty-handed. He couldn't let it go. The next morning, Jackson woke with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. The sun was breaking through the clouds, casting a soft light over the city as he traded his suit for a black sweater and jeans. He drove back to that stretch of road, the field stretching out under a clearer sky. He didn't know what he was looking for, maybe just a chance to say thanks, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he owed them more. As he rolled into the small town, he spotted them outside a weathered diner, their bikes propped against the wall. Marcus was tossing a football to Jayden, Corey laughing as he tried to intercept. "Hey, Kurnim," Marcus called out, recognizing him first. "It's the tire guy." The others turned, their faces lighting up. "Car still good?" Jayden asked, tossing the ball to Corey. "Thanks to you," Jackson said, stepping closer, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Mind if I sit with you for a minute?" They shrugged, motioning to a bench outside the diner. He sat, feeling the worn wood under him, the simplicity of it grounding him in a way his penthouse never had. "I wanted to thank you properly," he said, meeting their eyes. "You didn't just fix my tire yesterday. You saved something bigger, Marcus tilted his head, curious. It wasn't a big deal. You were stuck. We helped. What can none of the tremendous summermorn? Jayden nodded. Yes, Amasha. And it's not like we had anything better to do in that rain. Jackson chuckled, shaking his head. You've got more heart than most people I've met in my life. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, flipping it open. I know you didn't want money, but I want to do something for you. Something real. What do you need? The boys exchanged glances. Hesitating, Corey spoke up first, his voice soft. We don't need anything for ourselves. Marcus nodded, then leaned forward. But there's this place we go sometimes. The community center. It's kind of beat up. Roof leaks. Equipment's old. They've been trying to fix it. But it's slow. Too. Jackson raised an eyebrow, leaning back. A community center. That's what you want help with. Yeah, no, Mom. Jayden said, his eyes brightening. It's where kids hang out after school. Means a lot to the town. Corey added, if you want to do something, maybe that'd be cool. Jackson studied them, a slow smile spreading across his face. These kids weren't just kind, they were selfless, thinking beyond themselves. All right, he said. Aaron, standing, you've got a deal. I'll see what I can do. They grinned, their excitement quiet but real. The key. Pinar, thanks. Men run on Siren, Marcus said, offering a fist bump. Jackson returned it, feeling a spark of something he hadn't felt in years, purpose. A week later, he was back, this time with a plan. He'd called in favors, construction crews, suppliers, local businesses, all ready to transform the community center. He found Marcus, Jayden Hanimish, Joris Jayden, and Corey inside the rundown building, painting a banner for a fundraiser. Hey, tire guy, Marcus called, waving a paintbrush. What's up? Jackson grinned, stepping closer. I told you I'd help, didn't I? I've got people coming to fix this place up. Roof, playground. The works? Their jaws dropped, eyes wide. You're serious? Jayden asked, disbelief in his voice. Dead serious, Jackson said, kneeling to their level. You reminded me what matters. This is my way of saying thanks. The boys erupted into cheers, Marcus high-fiving Corey, Jayden laughing in shock. A woman walked in then, mid-30s, tired but warm, her arms full of papers. She said, eyeing Jackson. I'm Lisa, the director amidst her. Can I help you? I'm here to help you, Jackson replied. Standing, the boys told me about this place. I'm funding a full renovation. Whatever you need to make it what it should be. Lisa stared, her hand flying to her mouth. I don't even know what to say. Say yes, Wesson, Jackson said with a smile, and tell me how to make it happen. She laughed, tears in her eyes. Yes. Yes. Thank you. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Crews descended on the center, tearing out the old roof, fixing the walls, installing new wiring. Marcus Warren, Jayden, Marine, and Corey were there every day, helping where they could, carrying tools, painting, laughing with the workers. Jackson visited often, overseeing the progress. But his favorite moments were sitting with the boys and Lisa, dreaming up what the center could be. One Saturday, as the new playground took shape, swings, chia, a slide, a climbing wall, a crowd gathered. Families came to see the transformation, kids buzzing with excitement. Jackson stood with Lisa, watching the final bolts go into place. You've given this town more than a building, she said softly. You've given us hope. He nodded, a lump in his throat. Those boys gave me something first. Marcus Hinisher was a disjointuminish, Justin Derween, Westy remained, and Corey ran up, breathless. It's done. Marcus shouted, pointing to the playground. Can we try it? Jackson laughed. It's all yours. They bolted off, climbing the swings, their laughter ringing out as the crowd cheered. That night, as the sun set and families lingered, Jackson stood on the center steps, coffee in hand, watching the scene. Lisa joined him. You've changed, you know, she said. Yeah, on, he admitted, smiling. They showed me kindness doesn't need a reason, and I'm not done yet. Later, as he said goodbye to the boys, Marcus looked at him. See, serious. Thanks, us. Yeah, man, de one huan. Kamunam. For everything? No, Jackson said, kneeling. Thank you, you. You fixed more than my tire. They grinned, waving as he drove off, a quiet joy settling in his chest. The center wasn't just a gift, it was a beginning. And for the first time, Jackson Reed felt like he'd found something worth more than all the billions in the world. The weeks that followed the community center's grand opening were unlike anything Jackson Reed had ever experienced. Back in his high-rise office, surrounded by glass walls and the hum of ambition, he should have felt the familiar rush of returning to his empire. The merger was finalized. His name splashed across headlines as the man who'd pulled off the impossible yet again. Colleagues slapped his back. Emails flooded with congratulations, and the numbers in his bank account ticked ever upward. But as he sat at his polished mahogany desk, staring at the city skyline, his mind wasn't on the deals or the accolades. It was on that small town, on the sound of kids laughing as they swung on the new playground. On the way, Marcus, Jayden, and Corey had looked at him, not as Jackson Reed the billionaire, but as someone who'd shown up when it mattered. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight, and rubbed a hand over his face. The storm that had stranded him felt like a lifetime ago, but its echoes lingered. He couldn't shake the memory of standing in the rain, helpless and furious, only to be pulled out of that pit by three kids who didn't even know his name. It gnawed at him. This realization that his world, the one he'd built brick by brick with ruthless precision, had no room for the kind of raw, uncalculated kindness they'd shown. In his universe, every handshake was a transaction, every smile a negotiation. But out there, on that muddy road, those boys had rewritten the rules without even trying. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. A text from Lisa. The kids painted a mural today. Your name's on it. Thought you'd want to know. Attached was a photo, bright swirls of color on the community center's wall. With thanks, Sherbakin. Erkonashorn. Jackson scrawled in bold, messy letters. He stared at it, a slow grin tugging at his lips. Something warm bloomed in his chest. Unfamiliar but not unwelcome. He typed back, Hanu, tell them I'm honored. I'll stop by soon. Shopworn, and then he set the phone down, his gaze drifting to the notebook on his desk, the one he'd used to jot down ideas with the boys. It was still open to a page where Corey had doodled a stick figure version of them fixing the tire, complete with exaggerated raindrops and a goofy smile on Jackson's face. He chuckled, tracing the sketch with his finger. That weekend, he found himself back in the Bentley, driving the now familiar route to the town. The fields glowed golden under the late March sun, the air crisp with the promise of spring. He didn't call ahead. He didn't need to. As he pulled up to the community center, he saw a bustle of activity, kids running around the playground, parents chatting on benches, and the faint thump of music spilling from inside. He stepped out, his casual sweater and jeans blending in a way his suits never would, and scanned the crowd. Marcus was the first to spot him, perched on the jungle gym with a basketball in hand. Joey Jackson, he shouted, leaping down and jogging over. Jayden and Corey trailing behind. Didn't expect you back so soon, Jayden said, tossing the ball to Marcus. His cap was tilted back, revealing a teasing grin. What, you miss us already. Maybe I did. Jackson shot back, matching his tone. Heard you've been busy defacing the place with my name. Corey laughed, nudging Jayden. It was Marcus's idea. Said we had to make sure you didn't forget us. Forget you. Jackson raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms. Not a chance. He glanced at the mural, visible through the playground's edge, and felt that warmth again. Looks good. Hatason basmarna. Though, kafuensu. You've got talent. Corey's the artist, Marcus said, clapping the smaller boy on the shoulder. We just bossed him around. Corey ducked his head, a shy smile breaking through. It's nothing fancy. Just wanted it to look cool. It's more than cool, Jackson said, his voice softening. I don't know. It means something. He cleared his throat, shifting his weight. Sentiment wasn't his strong suit, but with these kids, it felt less like a weakness and more like a bridge. So, what's the plan today? You putting me to work again? Jayden smirked. We were going to shoot some hoops, but if you're offering... He tossed the ball to Jackson, who caught it with a surprised laugh. You're on, he said, dribbling it once before passing it back. But don't cry when I win. The next hour flew by in a blur of trash talk and clumsy shots. Jackson hadn't played basketball since college, and it showed his form was rusty, his aim off, but the boys didn't care. They hooted and cheered. Marcus blocking his shots with exaggerated flair, Jayden shouting pointers, Corey giggling every time Jackson missed. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his sweater sticking to his back. But he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this light. No boardroom, no stakes, no water, no warm-ups. Just the rhythm of the game and the easy camaraderie of three kids who'd somehow carved a space in his life. When they finally collapsed onto the grass, breathless and laughing, Lisa wandered over, a clipboard in hand. You're a natural with them, she said, nodding toward the boys. Didn't peg you for the playground type. Neither did I, Jackson admitted, wiping his brow. They've got a way of pulling you in. She smiled, a knowing glint in her eye. They do that. Carterum, this place, it's their heart. You know, you've made it theirs again. He looked at the boys, sprawled out and bickering over who'd scored more, and felt a pang of something he couldn't name. Pride, one. Maybe. Or gratitude. They made it mine. Two, Wendergronen, he said quietly. Almost to himself. Lisa tilted her head, studying him. You're different from the guy who showed up here a month ago. Less, I don't know. Guarded, Jackson snorted, brushing grass off his jeans. Don't get used to it. I've got a reputation to uphold. But his grin betrayed him, and she laughed, shaking her head. Sure you do. Coffee's inside if you want some. You've earned it. He followed her in, the boys trailing behind, still arguing over the game. The center buzzed with life. Kids painting at tables. A group playing board games in the corner. Volunteers organizing a stack of donated books. Jackson grabbed a cup of coffee, leaning against the wall as he watched. It was chaotic, messy, alive. Nothing like the sterile precision of his world. And yet it felt more real than anything he'd built. Marcus sidled up, sipping a soda. You sticking around for the movie night tonight? We're watching some old superhero flick. Corey's obsessed. Jackson raised an eyebrow. Superheroes. No mind him. What's your pick? Corey. Tomat. The boy perked up, pushing his glasses up his nose. Spider-Man. The old one. It's the best tornado you won on. Bold choice, Jackson said, nodding approvingly. I might have to stay for that. The boys lit up, Marcus punching the air. Sweet. You can sit with us, but no hogging the popcorn. Deal. Jackson laughed, raising his cup in a mock toast. As the day stretched into evening, he found himself sinking into a folding chair between Marcus and Jayden. A bowl of popcorn balanced on his knee. The movie flickered on a makeshift screen. The room filled with kids' gasps and cheers. Jackson barely followed the plot. His eyes kept drifting to the boys, their faces glowing with excitement, and to the crowd around him. A mix of families and neighbors who'd welcomed him without question. When the credits rolled, he lingered, helping stack chairs as the room emptied out. Lisa caught him on his way to the door. You're becoming a regular, she teased, crossing her arms. What's next? Moving here. Don't tempt me, he shot back. But there was a flicker of truth in it. This place, it's got something. I don't know how to explain it. You don't have to. She said, her tone softening. Just keep showing up. That's enough. He nodded, stepping outside into the cool night air. The boys were waiting by their bikes, waving him over. Thanks for hanging out, Jayden said, kicking at the gravel. You're pretty cool for an old guy. Jackson smirked. Watch it. Shit, near and adern. I'm not that old. Corey grinned. Old enough to lose at basketball, Marcus cackled, dodging Jackson's playful shove. See him rush you next time. Men or dish him, he said, hopping on his bike. Don't be a stranger. I won't. Jackson promised, watching them ride off into the dark. He climbed into the Bentley. The engine purring to life. But he didn't pull away immediately. The center loomed in his rearview mirror, its lights warm against the night. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the pull to rush back to the city, to chase the next win. He felt anchored, tethered to something bigger than himself. The drive home was quiet, the road stretching out under a starlit sky. His phone buzzed, another email from his team. Probably some urgent update, but he ignored it. Instead, he thought about the mural. The Ganenanum, Oh, I read the game. The way Corey's eyes had sparkled talking about Spider-Man. He thought about Lisa's words, about showing up. And as the city lights came into view, Jackson made a decision. This wasn't the end. It was just the start. He'd be back, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, because for all the billions he'd chased, this was the one thing that felt like it might last. The next few months flew by in a whirlwind of board meetings, late-night strategy sessions, and the relentless pace of Jackson Reed's empire. The merger had catapulted his company into new territory, stock prices soaring, investors clamoring for his next move. Headlines dubbing him the Titan of tech. He thrived in it, the chaos and the stakes fueling him like they always had. But every so often, when the noise died down and he was alone in his penthouse, the floor-to-ceiling windows framing a glittering city that never slept, his mind wandered back to that small town, to the creak of the community center's new swings, the scrawl of his name on a mural, the echo of Marcus's laugh. It was a pull he couldn't ignore, a quiet ache that grew sharper with each passing day. One crisp April morning, with the sun barely cresting the horizon, Jackson found himself restless. He'd woken early, the usual flood of emails and calls already piling up, but none of it held his attention. He paced his sleek kitchen, coffee cooling in his hand, the sterile silence of the space pressing in. His life was a machine, efficient, polished, come on, predictable, and for the first time, that felt suffocating. He set the mug down with a clink, grabbed his keys, and headed for the Bentley without a second thought. No suit today, just a gray hoodie and dark jeans. He didn't know what he was chasing, only that he needed to go. The drive to the town was muscle memory now, the highway unfurling beneath a sky streaked with pink and gold. As he pulled into the familiar gravel lot by the community center, he saw it was quieter than usual. No kids swarming the playground. No bikes leaning against the diner wall. He stepped out, the air cool against his skin, and noticed a handwritten sign taped to the center's door. Closed for spring cleanup, volunteers welcome. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Of course they'd be at it again. Those kids and their endless energy. He pushed the door open, the faint scent of paint and pine cleaner greeting him. Inside, the place was a controlled chaos. Tables pushed aside, brooms sweeping across the floor, a stack of trash bags by the wall. Lisa was in the thick of it, directing a handful of volunteers with a clipboard in one hand and a rag in the other. She glanced up as he walked in, her tired face breaking into a grin. "Well, look who's back," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her eyes. "You here to supervise or get your hands dirty?" "Little of both." "Wahashim," Jackson replied, rolling up his sleeves. "Where's the crew?" He didn't need to specify who he meant. Lisa knew. "Out back," she said, nodding toward the rear exit. "They're tackling the garden. Fair warning. They've got big plans and zero patience." He chuckled, heading that way, the familiar buzz of anticipation humming in his chest. Stepping outside, he spotted them immediately. Marcus wielding a shovel like a sword, Jayden hauling a bag of mulch, Corey crouched over a patch of dirt with a trowel. The garden was a mess of overturned soil and scattered weeds. But there was a method to their madness, stakes marking rows, a pile of seedlings waiting to be planted. Marcus saw him first, dropping the shovel with a theatrical groan. "Oh, great. The boss is here," he teased, wiping sweat from his brow. "You gonna tell us we're doing it wrong?" "Only if you are." Maitre Surishun, Jackson shot back, crossing his arms. "What's the plan here?" "Looks like a war zone." Jayden grinned, dumping the mulch at his feet. "Vegetable garden, Suriyuturinananantun. Lisa says we can grow stuff for the kitchen. Tomatoes, peppers, maybe some herbs." Corey's got the layout figured out. Jackson glanced at Corey, who looked up with a shy nod. "I read about it online," he said, pushing his glasses up. "If we do it right, it'll keep going all summer." There was a quiet pride in his voice, a spark that made Jackson's chest tighten. These kids, they didn't just dream. They did earn. Decidern. "All right, Puthu, then Okinasur Tom," Jackson said, grabbing a spare shovel. "Put me to work. Where do I start?" The boys exchanged amused glances, clearly not used to him jumping in so fast. Marcus pointed to a patch of stubborn weeds. "There were Wankan and Mudworm. Dig deep. Man, those suckers fight back." For the next few hours, Jackson lost himself in the rhythm of it, shovel slicing through dirt, the ache in his shoulders building as he yanked out roots and tossed them aside. The boys worked alongside him, their chatter filling the air. Marcus boasting about a trick shot he'd nailed in basketball. Jayden debating the best pizza toppings. Corey muttering about soil pH like a pint-sized scientist. Sweat soaked through Jackson's hoodie. Dirt caked under his nails. But he didn't care. It was messy, unglamorous, alive, and it felt more honest than any boardroom he'd ever commanded. By noon, the garden was taking shape, rows carved out, seedlings nestled in the soil, a rickety trellis propped up for climbing plants. They collapsed onto the grass, passing around a jug of water Lisa had brought out. Jackson took a long gulp, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Not bad," he said, surveying their work. "You might actually pull this off." "Might muffin turbich derwendurings," Jayden scoffed, elbowing him. "We're pros now. You're just slow." Jackson laughed, the sound rough and genuine. And for a moment, he felt like he belonged there. Really belonged. Not as a benefactor or a guest, but as part of something. Lisa joined them, plopping down with a sigh. "You're all insane," she said, but her smile was warm. "This looks amazing. We might actually feed people with this." She glanced at Jackson, her eyes softening. "You didn't have to come. You know, you've already done so much." He shrugged as Sim went to him, leaning back on his elbows. "Didn't feel like an option. These guys," he nodded at the boys, "they've got a way of dragging you in." Marcus grinned, tossing a clump of dirt at Jayden, who dodged with a yelp. "Yeah, we're irresistible," Marcus said, winking. "Keep telling yourself that." Jackson replied, but his tone was fond. He stayed through the afternoon, helping haul mulch and stake the trellis, the sun climbing higher as the garden came to life. When they finally called it a day, the boys dragged him inside to show off the mural again, now framed by a border of painted vines. Corey's latest addition. "Thought it needed some green?" Corey said, "Turjuan and Efesomon," scratching the back of his neck. "You like it." "Love it," Jackson said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You're wasted on this town. Kidder. Should be designing something big." Corey beamed, and Jackson felt that ache again. Pride. Yes, Splursurenomon, but also a strange longing to keep this, to hold on to it. As evening fell, he lingered, joining a small crowd for a potluck dinner the volunteers had thrown together. Plates of macaroni, fried chicken, and some questionable Jell-O salad circulated. The room buzzing with laughter and stories. Jackson sat with the boys, listening as they recounted the day's chaos, their voices overlapping in a way that felt like home. When it was time to go, Marcus stopped him by the door. "You're coming back, right?" he asked, his usual bravado softened by something earnest. Jackson met his gaze, nodding. "Yeah, I'm not done here." Marcus grinned, fist bumping him, and Jayden and Corey waved as he headed to the Bentley. Driving away, the town shrinking in his rear view, he felt the weight of that promise settle in. This wasn't just a detour anymore. It was a tether, a lifeline pulling him back to something he hadn't known he'd needed. Back in the city, the weeks stretched on, but the pull didn't fade. He started carving out time, weekends, early mornings, slipping away to the town whenever he could. Sometimes he'd help with the garden, watching it bloom with tomatoes and peppers. Other times he'd shoot hoops or sit with Lisa, brainstorming ways to expand the center's programs. The boys became a constant, Marcus challenging him to one-on-one, Jayden roping him into fixing bikes, Corey shyly showing him sketches of new projects. Each visit chipped away at the walls he'd built, the guarded edges softening under their relentless warmth. One humid June evening, as they sat on the center steps watching fireflies blink across the field, Jackson felt a shift. Marcus was sprawled out, tossing a pebble in the air, Jayden leaning back with his cap over his eyes, Corey tracing patterns in the dirt with a stick. "You ever think about leaving this place?" Jackson asked, his voice low, almost hesitant. Marcus caught the pebble, shrugging. "Sometimes, but this is home." "You know, where else we gonna go?" Jayden lifted his cap, squinting at him. "Why, you trying to kidnap us?" Jackson laughed, shaking his head. "Nah, wanasum. Just wondering what's next for you." Corey looked up, his glasses reflecting the fading light. "Maybe college, or art school. But I'd come back. This place matters." "Yeah, sir." Jackson said, staring out at the field. It does. He didn't say it aloud, but he felt it too, a tie to this town, to these kids that went deeper than he'd expected. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He was part of it, woven into its fabric by three boys who'd fixed more than a tire. They'd fixed him. And as the fireflies danced, he knew he'd keep coming back, not out of duty, but because this was where he'd found something real, something worth holding on to. The summer sun hung heavy over the small town by mid-July, its relentless heat turning the air thick and sticky. Jackson Reed pulled into the community center's lot, the Bentley's tires crunching on gravel baked hard by weeks of dry weather. He stepped out, the humidity hitting him like a wall, and tugged at the collar of his lightweight t-shirt. Black, simple, summer to watch on a one-in-one. A far cry from the crisp suits that still defined his city life. His dark hair was damp with sweat by the time he reached the center's door. But he didn't mind. These visits had become a rhythm, a heartbeat he could feel even when he was neck-deep in boardroom battles 100 miles away. Inside, the air was cooler. The hum of a new AC unit, a gift from one of his recent donations, battling the summer haze. The place was alive with its usual chaos. Kids darting between tables piled with craft supplies, volunteers stacking chairs, the faint twang of a guitar spilling from a corner where someone strummed lazily. Jackson scanned the room, his green eyes catching on Marcus, Jayden, and Corey huddled by the mural wall, heads bent over a notebook. Marcus was gesturing wildly, his voice carrying over the din. I'm telling you, we need fireworks. Big ones, Sereno. What's in there with them? It's gotta pop. Fireworks. Jackson called out, striding over with a smirk. What's this? Your master planned to burn the place down? The boys looked up, their faces splitting into grins. Marcus tossed the notebook to Jayden, crossing his arms with mock defiance. Nah, sword of Rindun. Man, worry, dead ton. It's for the summer bash. We're planning the grand finale. Lisa said we could go big this year. Jayden flipped the notebook open, showing Jackson a chaotic sketch of a stage. Uwasa lights, and what looked like explosions scribbled in red marker. It's next month, he said, his cap tipped back to reveal a gleam of excitement. Whole town's coming. Music. Food. Games. Gonna be epic. Corey nodded, pushing his glasses up with a dirt-smudged finger. We're doing a talent show. And 2, I might draw something live. On a big canvas. His voice was soft, but there was a spark there. A quiet confidence Jackson hadn't noticed before. Sounds like a hell of a party. Jackson said, leaning against the wall, you putting me to work again, or am I just here to watch you blow stuff up? Marcus laughed, a sharp, bright sound that cut through the room. Oh, you're in it. Missin' on 'em. We need someone to judge the pie contest. Lisa says you've got a discerning palate. Whatever that means. Means he's picky, Jayden quipped, dodging Marcus's playful shove. Jackson chuckled, shaking his head. Fine, I'll taste your pies. But if they're terrible, I'm blaming you 3. The boys dragged him into their planning, pulling him to a table littered with markers, crumpled paper, capacitors and rain urns, and a half-eaten bag of chips. For the next hour, he sat with them, tossing out ideas, maybe a dunk tank for the volunteers, a playlist heavy on old-school hip-hop, a raffle with prizes he could quietly fund. Their energy was infectious, bouncing between wild dreams and practical fixes. And Jackson found himself caught up in it, his usual guarded edge melting away. He sketched a rough layout of the event with Corey, laughing as Marcus insisted on adding a VIP section that was just a roped-off picnic table. Lisa wandered over eventually, her arms crossed and a tired smile on her face. You're corrupting them, she said, nodding at the mess of plans. I said simple, not carnival extravaganza. Too late, Jackson replied, tossing her a marker. They've got me hooked. Blame Marcus. He's the ringleader. Marcus grinned, unrepentant. When you were simmer sorene, defeating words, while Lisa sighed, sinking into a chair. Fine. But if this goes off the rails, I'm pointing at you. Driederern, Charwar, Dilresuri Dewarnason, he said, his tone light but his eyes steady. He liked that she called him Reed now, not Mr. Railwas Furentin Wayne Hamasaris Minmendon, Reedu. Not the billionaire, just a name. It felt earned. The weeks leading up to the bash blurred into a frenzy of preparation. Jackson started driving down more often, twice a week, then 3 times, hauling supplies in the Bentley's trunk, string lights, folding tables, a sound system he'd borrowed from a friend in the city. He'd roll up his sleeves and jump in, hammering stakes for a makeshift stage, stringing lights with Jayden, hauling coolers with Marcus. Corey shadowed him sometimes, sketching designs for banners or quietly handing him tools. His small presence a steady anchor in the chaos. One sweltering afternoon, as they tested the sound system, Marcus blasting a beat that rattled the center's windows, Jackson caught himself grinning like an idiot. Sweat dripped down his back. His hands ached from twisting wires. But he felt alive in a way his penthouse gym sessions never managed. Jayden cranked the volume, shouting over the music. "This is it. Menor der sur Kiberthuraden. Town's gonna lose it." Jackson laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "They'd better. No one in ours. We're not doing this for nothing." The night of the bash arrived with a golden sunset. The air still warm, but softened by a breeze that rustled the fields. The center's lot was transformed, lights twinkling overhead, tables groaning with food, a stage where a local band tuned their guitars. Townsfolk poured in, kids racing to the bounce house Jackson had rented last minute, adults clustering around a barbecue pit, spitting smoke. He stood by the pie table, a clipboard in hand, tasting entries that ranged from heavenly blueberry to a questionable lemon zucchini hybrid. Marcus hovered, sneaking bites, while Jayden heckled from the sidelines. "Don't puke. Old man, keep talking, and you're disqualified." Jackson shot back, but his grin gave him away. Corey slipped him a napkin, whispering, "The blueberry's the best," and Jackson nodded, marking it down. The kid had taste. Croissant on one. As dusk settled, the talent show kicked off. Kids sang off-key. A teen did a shaky magic act, and Corey took the stage with his canvas, sketching a vibrant scene of the town under the lights, fields, faces, the center glowing at its heart. The crowd hushed, watching his hands move, and when he stepped back, applause erupted. Jackson felt a lump in his throat, clapping harder than he meant to, pride swelling for the quiet boy who'd found his voice in color. The night peaked with Marcus and Jayden's grand finale, a makeshift fireworks display of sparklers and smoke bombs they'd rigged with a volunteer's help. It wasn't the explosion Marcus had dreamed of, but it lit up the lot in a haze of gold and silver, kids shrieking with delight. Jackson stood with Lisa, watching the chaos unfold. "They pulled it off," she said. "It's a come on." Her voice soft with wonder. "You pulled it off." "We all did," he corrected, his gaze on the boys as they high-fived through the smoke. The crowd cheered. The music swelled, and for a moment, Jackson let himself feel it, the weight of belonging, the joy of something built together. Later, as the event wound down and families trickled out, he found the boys by the stage, sprawled on the grass with sodas in hand. "You survived," Marcus said, tipping his can at him. "Not bad for a city guy. Not bad for you clowns." I'm either," Jackson replied, dropping down beside them. Corey handed him a soda, unopened to Barash's Sherbetun, and he cracked it. The cold fizz of relief against the night's lingering heat. "This was something else," he said, his voice low. "You should be proud." Jayden shrugged, but his grin was wide. "Yes, someone. It was dope. Thanks for sticking around." Corey nodded, adding, "Felt like you were one of us tonight." Jackson paused, the words hitting harder than he expected. "Maybe I was," he said, leaning back to stare at the stars peeking through the haze. They sat in comfortable silence, the crickets chirping, the distant hum of the town settling into sleep. When he finally stood to leave, Marcus stopped him. "Next time, we're doing a car wash. You in? Wouldn't miss it," Jackson said, fist bumping him. He drove off with the windows down, the night air rushing in, carrying the scent of grass and smoke. The city loomed ahead, but it felt less like a destination now, more like a detour from where he really wanted to be. Back in his penthouse, the quiet was deafening. He kicked off his shoes, the faint buzz of the bash still in his ears, and sank onto the couch. His phone lit up, missed calls, emails, the machine of his life grinding on, but he ignored it. Instead, he pulled out the notebook, flipping to a new page. He sketched a rough outline of the night, the stage, the lights, the boys' faces in the glow, and wrote beneath it, "So keep going." It wasn't a plan, not yet, but a promise. To them, to himself, This wasn't just a summer fling with a small town. It was a lifeline. And he wasn't letting go. August rolled in with a restless heat, the kind that clung to the skin and made every breath feel heavy. Jackson Reed's life in the city had hit a fever pitch. Boardroom battles over the merger's next phase, late-night calls with investors, a press tour that dragged him from sleek studios to stuffy conference halls. His name was everywhere, a fixture in the news cycle, the tech titan who'd turned a roadside breakdown into a billion-dollar win. He played the part flawlessly, sharp suits, sharper words, a smile that charmed cameras and silenced doubters. But beneath the polish, a restlessness gnawed at him, a quiet itch that no amount of success could scratch. The city felt like a cage, its glass towers and humming streets closing in, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw that small town, the glow of sparklers, the scrawl of a mural, the faces of 3 kids who'd cracked him open without even trying. One muggy Friday evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline and painted the penthouse in shades of orange, Jackson hit a breaking point. He just hung up on a call with a particularly grating shareholder, his patience frayed to threads. When his gaze landed on the notebook sitting on his coffee table, Corey's doodle of the tire fix stared back at him, a goofy stick-figure Jackson grinning through cartoon rain. He snorted, running a hand through his dark hair, and felt the tension in his chest shift. Not ease, exactly, but redirect. He didn't think twice. He grabbed his keys, swapped his dress shirt for a faded blue tee, and headed for the Bentley. The city could wait. The drive was a release, the highway stretching out like a lifeline under a sky bruising purple with dusk. By the time he reached the town, night had settled in, the air still thick but softened by the chirp of crickets and the distant hum of life. The community center's lot was quiet. No bikes or bustling crowds, just the faint glow of light spilling from the windows. He parked and stepped out, the gravel crunching under his sneakers, and took a deep breath. The scent of earth and summer grass hit him, grounding him in a way the city's sterile air never could. He didn't knock, just pushed the door open and stepped inside. The main room was dim, a few volunteers tidying up, the faint clatter of dishes echoing from the kitchen. Lisa was at a table near the back, hunched over a laptop, her brow furrowed in concentration. She glanced up as he approached, surprise flickering across her face before it softened into a smile. "Reed, Bethern," she said, leaning back in her chair. "You've got a knack for showing up unannounced. Keeps you on your toes," he replied, dropping into the seat across from her. "What's got you looking like you're solving world hunger?" She sighed, rubbing her temples. "Close. Masaman. Budget stuff. We're growing, more kids, more programs, but the numbers aren't keeping up. I'm trying to figure out how to stretch what we've got." Jackson nodded, his mind already turning. "How short are you?" She hesitated, then slid the laptop toward him. "About 20 grand. Enough to keep the after-school stuff going through fall. Maybe add a tutoring program. But donations are slow, and grants take forever." He scanned the screen, rows of figures, modest expenses, a wish list of supplies and staff hours. It was pocket change to him, a drop in the bucket of his world. But he knew better than to say that. This wasn't about flashing cash. It was about what the place meant. "Let me take a look," he said, his tone casual. "Might know some people who can chip in." Lisa raised an eyebrow, skeptical but hopeful. "You sure? I don't want you bailing us out every time we hit a wall." "Not bailing," he corrected, meeting her gaze. "Helping? There's a difference." She studied him for a moment, then nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. All right, but you're explaining it to the boys. They'll want in on this." "Speaking of," he said, glancing around, "where are they?" "Sorry, Hinawakaman." Lisa jerked her thumb toward the back door. "Out by the garden. Said they're guarding the peppers from rabbits. Pretty sure they're just goofing off." Jackson grinned. "Standing. Sounds about right. And I'll drag them in." He headed outside, the night air wrapping around him like a warm blanket. The garden was a patchwork of green under the moonlight. Tomatoes ripening on vines, peppers peeking through leaves. Marcus, Jayden, and Corey were sprawled on a blanket near the trellis, a flashlight beam bouncing between them as Marcus waved it like a spotlight. And then, bam, the rabbit just stares at me, like make it on some. "You gonna do something? Oman punk." "A frother," he was saying, his voice pitched high with drama. Jayden snorted, tossing a twig at him. "You screamed like a baby, too." "Diduan, don't lie." Corey giggled, his small frame shaking, and Jackson couldn't help but laugh as he stepped into view. Rabbit invasion. Huh? They're he called out, hands in his pockets. Marcus swung the flashlight up, blinding Jackson for a second before dropping it with a grin. Jacob, you're just her. It's the man himself. What's up? What's up? City boy. Jayden sat up, tipping his cap back. You here to save us from the bunnies? Something like that, Jackson said, dropping onto the blanket beside them. Heard you're throwing a bash last month. Figured I'd see what's next. Corey handed him the flashlight, his eyes bright behind his glasses. We're just chilling tonight. Garden's doing good, though. Check it out. He pointed to a row of peppers, their red and yellow skins glinting faintly. Not bad, Jackson said, genuinely impressed. You're turning into farmers now. Marcus flexed an arm, grinning. Farmers? Chorik, Siritin, Im, yeah, warriors. Whatever it takes. We're multi-talented, multi-trouble. More like... Jackson shot back, and the boys cackled, the sound cutting through the quiet night. They fell into an easy rhythm, swapping stories, Marcus recounting the bash's sparkler fiasco, Jayden mimicking a volunteer's bad dance moves, Corey shyly admitting he'd sold a sketch to a neighbor for $5. Jackson listened, the weight of the city slipping away, replaced by the warmth of their chatter. Eventually, he steered the conversation to Lisa's budget woes. She's stressing about cash, he said, keeping it light. Center's growing, but it's tight. Any ideas? The boys exchanged looks, their playfulness fading into something thoughtful. Jayden spoke first. Well, leaning forward, we could do another fundraiser. Car wash. Maybe. Worked last time. Marcus nodded, tossing the flashlight between his hands. Yetin, Pidwarb. But bigger. Swantunon. Charge more. Get the whole town in. We've got a rep now. Corey chewed his lip, then piped up. What about art? I could make stuff to sell. People liked the mural. Jackson felt a swell of pride, their earnestness hitting him square in the chest. All solid, he said, nodding. Car wash could pull in a few hundred. Art might double that if we push it. I'll match whatever you raise, quietly, so Lisa doesn't freak out. Their eyes widened. Marcus letting out a low whistle. You're serious. Dead serious, Jackson said, his voice firm. You guys lead. I'll back you up. Deal. They grinned, fists bumping him in unison. Deal, Jayden said, already plotting. We're washing every car in this town. The next morning, they kicked into gear. Jackson stuck around, helping them plaster the town with flyers, bright, messy things Corey designed with cartoon cars and splashes of color. They hit the diner, took Kuster and Dirty over a new one, the gas station, the little library, taping them up with a mix of tape and bravado. By noon, the center was a hub again, kids volunteering to spread the word. Lisa shaking her head at the chaos but smiling all the same. Jackson chipped in, hauling buckets and sponges, his jeans streaked with soap by the time they set up a test run in the lot. The car wash took off the next weekend. A sunny Saturday that brought a line of dusty pickups and minivans snaking down the road. Marcus manned the hose, spraying Jayden more than the cars, while Corey scrubbed tires with quiet focus. Jackson jumped in, soaping hoods and bantering with drivers, folks who'd started recognizing him, slapping his back like he was one of theirs. The cash box filled fast, fives, tens, so a few crumpled 20s in Corey's table of sketches, simple drawings of the town and its people. Sold out by midday, Jackson watched from the sidelines, a soda in hand, as the boys worked, their laughter mingling with the splash of water and the hum of chatter. They were a force, unstoppable in their messy, joyful way, and he felt a pang of something fierce. Pride, yes, but also a longing to freeze this moment, to keep it close. By dusk, they'd raked in nearly $1,000, plus another 500 from Corey's art. Jackson slipped Lisa a check for $2,000, keeping his promise, and she stared at it. Then at him, her eyes glistening. You're insane, she said, but her voice cracked with gratitude. This keeps us going. All of it. Blame them, he said, nodding at the boys as they collapsed on the grass, soaked and grinning. They're the muscle. I'm just the bang. She laughed, shaking her head, and he joined them, dropping down with a groan. You're killing me, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. I'm too old for this. Too slow. Maybe Messery, Marcus teased, tossing him a water bottle. Jayden smirked. Yeah, I want to know. You washed, like, 3 cars, Corey giggled, adding, but you paid for the soap, so we'll keep you. Jackson laughed, the sound rough and free, and leaned back, the grass cool against his skin. The sky was fading to indigo, stars winking awake. And for the first time in months, he didn't feel the pull of the city's demands. He felt rooted, tethered to this patch of earth and these kids who'd turned his world upside down. You're stuck with me now, he said, half joking, half meaning it. Hope you're ready. Marcus grinned, tossing a pebble in the air. Bring it on. Money and assurance. We've got plans. And as the night deepened, Jackson knew he'd be back again and again, because this wasn't just a place anymore. It was a promise, a piece of him he hadn't known he'd lost, and he'd fight like hell to hold on to it. September crept in with a whisper of cooler air, the first hint of autumn brushing the edges of the small town. The community center hummed with its usual life, but there was a new rhythm to it now, a steadiness born from the summer's chaos and triumphs. The garden bloomed with late harvests, peppers and tomatoes piled in baskets for the kitchen, while Corey's sketches adorned the walls, a quiet testament to the growth that had taken root here. Jackson Reed had become a fixture, his Bentley a familiar sight in the gravel lot, his presence woven into the fabric of the place as seamlessly as the boys' laughter or Lisa's tireless grit. On a crisp Saturday morning, the town gathered for one last event before the season turned, a harvest fair, simple but heartfelt, with tables of home-baked goods, a hayride looping through the fields, and a bonfire planned for dusk. Jackson arrived early, his gray hoodie swapped for a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up as he helped Marcus and Jayden stack wood for the fire. Corey darted between them, taping up hand-drawn signs with a focus that made Jackson smile. The air smelled of cider and wood smoke, the sky a clear, endless blue, and for once, Kanada Suanon, he didn't check his phone, didn't feel the tug of the city's demands. He was here, fully, Swasa Suriur, and it felt right. The day unfolded in a blur of small joys, kids tugging at his arm to join a sack race, Lisa roping him into judging a chili cook-off, the boys dragging him to the hayride, where Marcus nearly tipped them all out with his antics. Laughter came easy, spilling from him in ways that still surprised him, and as the sun dipped low, casting golden light over the fields, he found himself by the bonfire pit, watching the flames crackle to life. The crowd gathered, faces glowing in the flickering light, and Jackson stood shoulder to shoulder with Marcus. Jayden, and Corey, their chatter a steady hum beneath the night's quiet. Lisa stepped up, a tin mug of cider in hand, and raised it to the group. To this place, she said, her voice carrying over the fire's snap. To everyone who keeps it going. And to you, she nodded at Jackson. Then the boys, for reminding us what it's all about. The crowd cheered, mugs clinking, and Jackson felt a flush of warmth that had nothing to do with the flames. Marcus elbowed him, grinning. You're stuck with us now. No escaping. Wouldn't dream of it. Jackson replied, his voice low but steady. He glanced at Jayden, who tipped his cap with a smirk, and Corey, who gave a shy thumbs up, and felt something settle in his chest. A certainty, solid as stone. As the fire burned higher, the boys pulled him into a game of tag with the younger kids, their shouts echoing across the lot. He ran, dodging Marcus's wild lunges, tripping over Jayden's outstretched leg, laughing until his sides ached. When they finally collapsed by the fire again, breathless and grinning, Corey handed him a stick with a marshmallow spirit on it. You're terrible at this, he said, his eyes twinkling behind his glasses. You had to turn on. Well, you're stuck with me too. Jackson shot back, roasting the marshmallow until it charred. They ate in companionable silence, the sweetness sticking to his fingers, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. Lisa joined them. Settling on a log, and for a while, they just watched the flames, the crowd thinning as families drifted home. When it was just the 5 of them, Marcus spoke up, his voice softer than usual. You're not leaving. Right. Tim, come on. For good, there was a flicker of worry in his eyes, a crack in his usual bravado, and Jackson felt it like a punch. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, meeting Marcus's gaze. Then Jayden's awas surin to Silisabert Corey to Manan Jim. Then Corey's hati yasurin on Barnes. I'm not going anywhere, he said, the words heavy with promise. City's still there. My work's still there. But this, he gestured to the center. The fire. This is home now. You made it that way. Jayden smirked, but his eyes were bright. Good red surtum. 'Cause we'd hunt you down. Corey nodded, adding, your family. You know, the word hung there, simple and raw. And Jackson swallowed hard, nodding back. Family. He echoed, the weight of it sinking in. He'd spent years building an empire, chasing a legacy measured in dollars and headlines. But this messy, loud, beautiful thing was the real prize. The boys had given him that, starting with a flat tire and a rainy day. And he'd never stop being grateful. The fire dwindled to embers, the night growing still. Lisa stood, stretching. I'm calling it, she said, smiling at them. You all good to lock up? Jackson nodded, waving her off. And the boys lingered with him, poking at the coals with sticks. When they finally headed inside, he stayed a moment longer, staring at the fading glow. The town slept around him, the stars sharp overhead. And he felt a peace he hadn't known he'd been searching for. Driving back to the city that night, the Bentley's hum a quiet companion. Jackson didn't feel the usual pull to dive back into the grind. He'd be back tomorrow. Maybe to fix a bike with Jayden, shoot hoops with Marcus, or sit with Corey while he sketched. He'd keep showing up, not because he had to, but because he wanted to, because this was where he belonged. Months later, when winter dusted the town with snow and the center glowed with holiday lights, Jackson stood by the mural, now framed with painted frost, and watched Marcus, Jayden, Kasamarwin, and Corey lead a pack of kids in a snowball fight. Lisa handed him a coffee, her breath fogging in the cold. You've changed this place, she said, her voice soft. And yourself, he smiled, sipping the coffee, his eyes on the boys. They changed me first, he said. I'm just keeping up. And as their laughter rang out, sharp and bright against the winter hush, Jackson Reed knew he'd found his place, not in the towers of the city, but here, with them, where every moment mattered, where he was home.